You can start now, though.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening around the world. My name is Doug Brunke. I'm the founder and CEO of Global Chamber, and I think I have the best job in the world because every day I come into work, we have lots of happy members who are looking for opportunities, and then I get to do fun stuff like what we're about to do. So thank you for zooming in today and listening to 4 really smart, amazing women leaders. They're going to be talking about what's happening in Asia around women's leadership. One of the things that we care deeply about is that business grows and that everybody gets a chance to do it. And it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman or what color your skin is, that everybody counts. And that certainly women we know around the world sometimes don't get the same opportunities as men, and that's just not right, and that's not fair. And so we definitely are very interested to make sure that the progress is still being made. So we're very interested to hear more about what progress is being made, what's still left to do, and then hopefully we'll get some tips on how to navigate in your own leadership, whether you're a man, woman, or whatever your situation is. So our first guest and our first keynote speaker is Debbie Howard. You probably remember her giving one of the most outstanding presentations we've had a few weeks ago on the Japan market. She's the chairman at the Carter Group. She's zooming in to talk about primarily Japan, but she's experienced with business all around the world. So Debbie, just thank you so much for all that you do, and really appreciate you sharing your expertise today with us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Doug. I'm happy to be here. So shall I just go ahead and chat a little bit about the background in Japan?
That would be great.
Okay. Okay, great. I'm going to tell you a little story about my time in Japan. I'm actually speaking to you from Wimberley, Texas, near Austin. And the reason I'm here is because of COVID-19, of course. But normally I spend quite a bit of time in Japan. And in fact, I lived in Japan for 35 years. I'm coming up on my 35-year anniversary. I went to Japan in 1985. And I was working at first for McCann Erickson Hakuhodo for their research division. And, you know, I was a young whippersnapper from the United States. I was sort of a upwardly mobile career woman, if you will. And I went into a foreign multinational company, McCann Erickson, who was joint ventured with Hakuhodo at the time. And I felt like I had stepped into a time warp. We had nothing but what we called at the time office ladies. I didn't call them that, but the Japanese called them that. I don't know if any of you have ever heard that term before, but I was kind of horrified to see young, capable women who were relegated to tea serving and copy making. And even when I tried with some of my Japanese managers to give them like a thought-provoking assignment, I was told to no. They're to sit there at their desk, literally looking straight ahead until someone gave them the next assignment. It was kind of horrific for me as a woman in business. And also the men never brought their wives to company outings, which I thought was really weird, but it was just kind of like not done in Japan. So moving now, in 1986, we had the equal opportunity law passed in Japan. And I thought maybe things will start to change. By the early 90s, we started seeing men being more engaged in child rearing, and we started seeing families more out in society. So we would see a man with a baby carrier on the front. We never ever saw that for when I first got there to Japan. And so we started to feel some change. And then in 1999, Kathy Matsui of Goldman Sachs coined the term Womenomics and pointed out that if half the society were allowed to participate, we could improve the entire economy of Japan. And she was very, very effective with her facts and figures and has continued to push that over the years. In 2007, we had labor market reform. In 2015, we had another government effort to set quotas in the workplace. I just want to say one thing: we need more, and we need it faster, right? It's so slow in Japan. I'm not saying that nothing has happened, and I don't want to be too critical, because movement is good, and I'm happy that there is the movement that there has been. But the fact is that there are still many, many Japanese women who would like to work, who are not able to. There are still many Japanese women who cannot re-enter the workforce after they leave the workforce when they're married and have children. There are still pay inequities. There is still plenty of work to be done. And that's just a little bit of a background on what's been going on in Japan. In 2020, our company, the Carter Group, did a survey, a regular annual tracking survey, and we found that there is a feeling that women are making progress in Japanese society. One of my favorite points about this statistic, though, is that more men think that's true than women. So women don't see the progress as much as men do. Big surprise, but it's moving. It's moving in the right direction, and I think that's very good. We also have a record 71% of females in the workforce in Japan. The problem is a mismatch of getting more women in higher levels, and Japan trails most developed countries in that respect. But despite all the problems, women still want to work. Many women still want to work, and we're working on it. I think that's what I can say at this point.
That sounds good. Yeah, working, and as you say, it's too slow. And so it'll be interesting to see what moves it forward. That'll be part of our Q&A section. Mm-hmm. So thank you, Debbie, for that. We're going to go through our first 4 speakers, and then we'll have about 30 minutes for questions and answers. So if you could either send your question through the chat area, the Q&A area within Zoom, or send an email to info@globalchamber.org, and we'll take care of that either during the session or after the session if we run out of time. Susie Zheng is our next speaker. She's the CEO and founder of Z Choice International. She's the former vice president of Asia Market Development at Whitewave, which is a part of Danone. So Susie, you've been very involved in Asia. We really appreciate you taking the time today and sharing your thoughts about what you're seeing and how we can take advantage of kind of the next steps.
Appreciate that, Doug. I appreciate the opportunity to share my experience and my observations for the China market as well. I'm based in Denver, US right now, but I was born and raised in China. I went to college in China, and throughout my 25 years corporate America experience, I've been sent back to China to live as an expat 3 times for major companies like PepsiCo, Kraft Foods, and lately Danone, Whitewave, part of Danone. So obviously I'm not an expert in the women rights or paying salary and the equality. I'm not an authority either. However, because I'm a business woman, and not just through my own experience, but also through friends and the relatives and the families, I've seen the changes. So on the one hand, the government has been making a great effort since the new China established in 1949 to make women equal as men. So that has been a great movement since 1949. And that's still the case with government or state-owned companies, enterprises, that women get equal opportunities. I grew up that way, actually. I actually worked as a teacher before I came to the States. I never thought women would get paid less. On the other hand, however, because the economical development, especially in the 1980s, China has established many private companies, and private sectors have been having the authority and also have the needs to achieve the financial goals. And one of the area, right or wrong, it's been actually in the women and men sort of gender pay gaps. So we call the salary gaps. There has been gender gaps. Even though my last role in China, that was 2014 to 16, I was in charge of the organizational development for a joint venture in China and responsible for hiring. I want to say that what we did was the contrary. We tried everything we could to get women in the leadership role in our leadership groups, and I don't recall any time we talked about the salary differences. However, data don't lie. If I look at the reports, surveyed all the companies in China, including the private sectors as well as the government, and China-based companies versus international companies, there have been gaps, actually. It's sadly to see that. It's somewhat shocked me. So on the one hand, for example, when we talk about women in labor force, growing up, the expectation for girls or women is like, you got to go to work, you got to go to college, and you got to have a career. There was no second thoughts growing up. That was in the 70s, right? In the 80s. However, that seems to have been changed, that women in labor force, the ratio from original in the 40s, in the 50s, 60s, be relatively high, now to actually dropping, and especially since 2000, the year 2000. Reasons because the environment have changed, the family situation have changed. Another rate data, again, showing the salary gaps have been widening among the genders. So the data showing that back 1990, women makes 77 yen per every 100 yen men make. So it's a 77 to 100 ratio. However, in 20 years, 2010, that ratio has dropped to 67 to 100. So dropped 10%, and that is in the urban area. But when it comes to rural area, women actually makes even less. So that ratio in the 2010, that was 56% to men. So I just quoted you that this report, it was studied by the Women Office in the UN 2014. So again, that is a number that obviously we don't want to see, the trend that we don't want to see. And on the contrary, if you look at women in the higher education, women like me who were expected to get a higher education, that number actually has increased almost 50% in the 30 years. So from 1980 to 2010. So, but the salary gaps even actually go into the opposite direction. So unfortunately, it's not coordinated. So again, I just want to share that experience with you, that in China, just like many other category or subject, you're going to see very different, I want to say variation, I don't want to say. So again, the government, state-owned enterprises, they still try to make efforts to make women equal, but yet there's private sectors still have an opportunity to catch up.
Wow, that's shocking. I'm very, very surprised. So thank you for sharing that. We'll definitely circle back on that. Thank you very much, Susie. Our third speaker is Andrea Stephenson Connor. She's the CEO at Stephenson Connor Global Strategies, and she's the past president at Athena International. Andrea is a good friend to the Global Chamber. We've really enjoyed working with you, Andrea. You've had some really interesting global experiences, and then of course with Athena International, certainly standing for the empowerment of women to do whatever they can do. So you've spoken with a lot of women all around the world and seen what's happening, and so we're very much interested to hear your perspectives, especially from your times in Asia, your times traveling, and your global experience. Thank you for sharing today.
Sure. Well, thank you, Doug, for having me, and I'm thrilled to be here with my esteemed colleagues. You may hear, I will reflect on China a little bit. So it's interesting, the report that you referenced, Susie, in 2014. I may have been there calculating some of that report during that was when I was on assignment with UN Women in Beijing. So I may have calculated some of those numbers. The topic of emerging leaders is something that I'm very passionate about, as Doug has referenced. I did have the privilege to live, work, and learn in the Asia Pacific region off and on for about 20 years. I did a short stint with UN Women in Beijing in late 2014, and I'm still mentoring emerging women leaders from rural China with a program called the World Academy for the Future of Women. So I like to say I have 40 Chinese daughters that my husband and I continue to mentor. It's a wonderful, wonderful experience for us. What I have discovered about Asian women in general, with the opportunity to travel all over the region, is that Asian women are resilient, they are innovative, and they are passionate about being change agents for the global world. So since I'm going to kind of go at this from a global history perspective, and I want to take you back to the early 1980s when there was a loud, hot debate on the role for women in the professional realm. There was discussion about, would women commit to a career? Did women have the skills to thrive in the corporate world? Could a woman be an entrepreneur? And then there was a mindset that inspired the organization that I worked for, Athena International, are women leaders. Good news is that that debate sparked a lot of investigation and research and exploration that opened our eyes to see there's over 30 years of research from organizations that we're all familiar with, McKinsey, Catalyst, Credit Suisse, the Harvard Business School, and they all tell us with a resounding yes that women can be and indeed are leaders. But more than that, women are really good for business. And I can categorically say that because there's so many studies that show that companies are more successful and more profitable when women are involved in the conversation at the C-suite in the boardroom. One of the reasons is, as Susie and Debbie were talking about, women see the world from a different lens. We wear many hats and many roles, and so that allows us to be really good at customer satisfaction initiatives, improved employee engagement, stronger growth, and organizations that have at least 2 women in leadership roles report on average an increased profit of 15%. So they're really good numbers that show that positive impact. Our current situation, over the last 14 years, the World Economic Forum has been monitoring the global impact and the gender gap. And Susie mentioned that pay gap that she was talking about that is happening in China. They have been monitoring 153 nations. When you look at the 2020 results, European nations, in particular the Nordic nations and New Zealand and Rwanda, are actually economically empowering women. They're actually faring better on their gender parity, gender gap index. But the Asian nations are actually doing not so bad. Particularly China is making significant progress in the business world. Chinese women rank first in the world in terms of occupying senior management positions at 51% of senior managers. As Susie referenced, maybe the salary gap is still there, but they're being placed in those positions, so they're getting that responsibility and the skill sets that allow them to advance. Chinese women also rank first in the world in the representation of professionals and tech workers. Particularly in the economy that we are in now, that's really important. And then when you look at new entrepreneurial ventures, particularly in the e-commerce space, women represent 51% of the startups. So if you think of companies like Alibaba and the ability to be able to set up your own business and sell on the Alibaba platform and Tmall, the women as entrepreneurs are really doing well in China in those spaces. I attribute a lot of that to that innovation and ingenuity that I mentioned, but also the literacy rate. Since the new China launched in the late 1940s, literacy rate for women has catapulted. China has a 99.9% literacy rate for women.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They far exceed even my own country, the United States. They have a higher literacy rate. Mm-hmm. And as Susie mentioned, they're attending the top universities, not only within China, but also globally. Your Harvards, your Yales, your Stanfords, your McGills, they're attending the top universities. It just hasn't quite translated back into the salaries yet, which is why there's such a big shift to entrepreneurism in China. Yeah. So I want to shift a little bit to my home country. So the numbers of women in key leadership roles in the United States, female CEOs in Fortune 500 companies, we have 34. They count them. There's so few. It's 7.4%. That's up from 6.7% last year. There's less than 2% of Fortune 500 CEOs are women of color, and none are Black women. If you've been following the news, you'll know that we're having a very significant conversation in our country about Black Lives Matter. I think we're going to see some changes in those numbers coming ahead. Well over, long time overdue. 2019 brought a record number of enterprises and women-owned businesses. 42% of total U.S. companies are women-owned, compared to 29% in 2007. So you're seeing a significant shift of women stepping into entrepreneurial ventures. That's 450,000 new female entrepreneurs each year, or 1,800 per day, that are starting out new business ventures. So while these figures represent a sampling of the gender impact of just 2 nations, it's a signal that women worldwide are making an impact as leaders, as CEOs, as entrepreneurs, as board members, and as senior level leaders. Yet it's still not enough. We represent 51% of the population, and our impact is far below what is possible. If you think about putting all the women who are smart and talented around the world to work, our global GDP would be very positively impacted. One of the things that I did learn at my time with UN Women in Beijing, and then following all the global trends, is with the 4th Industrial Revolution, that the progress that women have made is going to be disproportionately impacted with the 4th Industrial Revolution, with technology, because the jobs that technology is replacing are jobs that women typically hold. So I have taken a huge commitment and investment in supporting women in technology. Working here locally, aligning with organizations like the Women in Tech Network to be able to help build that pipeline. There's a leaky pipeline for girls opting out at middle school. They're good in math, but they tend to opt out at middle school. And there's a whole reason why, but the ones that do stay in that pipeline, they tend to fall out at middle management within technology companies. So I think that is where, as a global community, where we as women across the globe can be making an impact, is to ensure that we're supporting young girls to stay in those math and science fields and to be helping them stay in the pipeline. So if you're a successful woman, it's important that you are lifting up the next generation. Have coffee with them, invite them to do a job shadow to kind of see what you do, so that it helps them visualize and they see what's possible. So I can go on and on and on. So I'm going to stop there and leave room for questions. But obviously you can tell I'm very passionate about that.
Absolutely, as we all are. And so that's wonderful. Our next speaker, Cesar, if Cesar will be queuing up. We realized a couple weeks ago when we put this together that Aparna Ranadive, our executive director in Mumbai, will basically 4:30 in the morning, when we started this event. And so that doesn't bode well for getting her live. So she has done a recording on the situation in India and also her perspective. So here's Aparna.
Hi, Doug. Thank you for having invited me to this forum. And it's a pleasure to be sharing this place with Debbie, Susie, and Andrea as well. Talking about Indian women in the professional setup, or India always held leadership positions in India, in the corporate or even otherwise. India is coming of age, and women professionals have held very senior positions, whether it be in business, be it politics, be it sports, be it even in the defense forces today. And it would be wrong to have not mentioned about the women leaders and in the form of working on the COVID, in the war against COVID. It'll be wrong to not have mentioned them, because they're leaders in their own way. So India has had a multiple number of women holding positions in the professional world, and the participation of women, though not very high as compared to the other nations, has been in the range of about 35% until about 2018. From there on, we've seen a sort of a steady decline in India, and there are many reasons and many challenges to that as well. But having said that, from where we started to where we are today, there have been a lot of changes that have been brought about to the business environment to enable these women leaders and women professionals to be a part of the workforce. Be it policy decisions which have been changed, like a maternity leave, or whether it is inclusion of a mandate to include women professionals as a part of the board. We had a very small number of women directors on the boards of companies, about an average of about 10% odd. And the government and the professionals in the business world has seen this as much as a problem, and have encouraged the participation of women in the boards, in the form of including at least one independent woman director on the boards of companies. So the Department of Company Affairs has included this as a part of the mandate. There are government regulations which are being changed on maternity leaves and women, and added to women's safety, like including policies of whether it is sexual harassment committees have been set up to ensure that there is safety of women guaranteed at work. It's a different story. Indian women still don't come up to the fore and lodge complaints about sexual harassment, which I'm sure is a case across many countries across the globe. It's still considered to be a taboo and a stigma. Increasingly and surely, diversity and inclusion departments are being set up in different organizations to further the cause of women professionals in the companies. They are the ones who take care of ensuring that the ratio of women professionals in the company is maintained. There are policies and processes which are pro-women professionals which are being included, and this I'm assuming, and it has been the case, that it's thanks to many women leaders who've held senior positions in the organizations. There's Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw, or whether it is Megha Tata, who heads the Discovery channel in India, Discovery Business in India. I think all of these women have contributed greatly to ensuring that the changes have been brought about. But there's still a long way to go. I think India is now moving into that direction where we would have wanted to be one of the top 3 economies of in the world. And in order that we reach there, of course, the COVID situation has set us back by a few years, but nonetheless, the ambition is still there. And if not the first 3, at least the first 5 global economies of the globe, of the world, is what we're heading towards. And if that number has to be achieved, then the staggering, the decline in the number of women professionals that has gone from 35% to about 26.4% until recently, that has to be, a lot of efforts are being made to bring that up to the, to an acceptable level. Having said that, India still used to be, or still is a patriarchal society, and the women professionals' income is not considered to be as a primary income, a source of income. She's still considered to be more of a caretaker, a homemaker, where she is required to manage the family, manage the husband and the children, take care of everybody's health, and ensure that the family is taken care of. So therefore, it is seen that a lot of women professionals tend to drop out somewhere mid-career. There are a lot of women who reach the top, but there is also the glass ceiling which stops them. But there are also these women professionals who reach mid-career and they're forced to either drop out because either the husbands are transferred, if not, then there's a family pressure, and they're torn between the family and their career. And the obvious choice is that they choose the side of the family to their careers. Now, there is a lot of work being done on that front as well, where women professionals are being supported. There are support groups being formed. There are recruitment consultants who are paid a little higher as compared to the rest in order to bring in diversity to the organizations. But the challenge that I see in this setup or in this environment is that gender parity is still an issue. Women professionals, especially if they're of that marriageable age or who are supporting a family, are not preferred on plum positions or on key projects. That's because the notion is that they might, they either will get married and go, or else then if they're already married, then they will have to take care of the family and succumb to the pressures of the family, and then not be able to keep late hours or odd working schedules or what have you. So that dissuades a lot of women professionals into entering into taking up leadership positions, into taking up plum positions. And the managers are also not very, game in doing that. I was reading a report recently, and where they said that gender sensitivity is not even included as a part of the curriculum in our schools and colleges. So therefore, that gender insensitivity still remains. The report said that Bangladesh is one such country which has included gender sensitivity, and about 75% of the population seems to be going through this through the training on gender sensitivity, which is a good thing. And I think India can definitely imbibe that. But yeah, there are these challenges and there are these impediments to growth. And I think while women have proven their mettle time and again, whether it is in the forces, whether it is in companies and taking up board positions or CEO positions, but there's still a long way to go. I think some of the companies which have been acknowledged as places for women professionals to grow and to prosper and to thrive in are companies like Accenture, like Nestle, IBM. These companies have very clear-cut processes and policies which are which enable the women professionals to grow in that direction. Mental and emotional health is becoming a big focus area in the country today, because we have a large population of people, whether men or women, but largely women suffering from chronic mental and emotional health issues such as depression. And there are now helplines, and there are now committees and groups and various forms of addressing addressal issues, addressal mechanisms to put this problem at ease. And within companies or even outside, a lot of focus has been given to the mental and emotional health of women professionals. And I think these are small steps that that help, or that kind of give the confidence to women leaders and women professionals that they will be taken care of. And I'm sure it will not be long before we will have an almost, I'm hoping that we'll at least have 50% participation in the workforce, if not more, in terms of women leaders taking on the mantle. Thank you, and over to you, Doug.
Great, thank you, Aparna. And so clearly a lot of really interesting information there and somewhat consistent with what we've already heard. Curious, the first question, just we'll throw it out to the group, all of you, so whoever would like to answer this. The issue of leadership and women having a different form and style of leadership came up amongst all of you, really. How do you handle that country to country in terms of what's expected, what your own personal style is, what you think is effective, and how do you navigate that? Do you modify your behavior country to country? How do you as a business leader handle the fact that people are expecting different things in different countries?
I'll start, and then I think I experience it from a different lens. So when I'm in a different country, there is in some ways, because I'm an American and I obviously look very American, that people are tolerant if I may not deal with a cultural norm the way that there seems to be some leniency. But in general, I show up as who I authentically am, which is in turn, respectful and mindful of the various cultures, kind of leaning into that empathy, the spirit of collaboration, giving back, building relationships along the way. I really think it goes across cultures. But when I have been in other countries and leading in other countries, I think I get a pass sometimes if I maybe step on toes just because of they understand where I'm coming from, and I'm coming to them authentically and with trying to be respectful.
Got it. That makes sense. Susie and Debbie, do you see the same thing?
Debbie, go ahead.
Okay, thanks. I absolutely think that bringing your authentic self to every situation is a really important part of it. Thank you for saying that, Andrea. And I have also gotten passes working in different cultures because, you know, maybe you don't know all the rules, but, you know, often clients will ask me how they should act in Japan, how to pass the business cards, how to bow, and all of that. It's all very important, but what's more important is just to practice good international manners, no matter where you are. And we tend to be a little bit, maybe I don't know if forceful is the right word, but we're certainly a little loud and open, saying our thing in America, and you know, we all, I think, learn as we're coming up in the world as professionals that you may have to style shift every now and then in a meeting. I've seen the eyes of men looking back at me in meetings, and I've known I was not getting anywhere. Right? Like, have you seen those eyes, Andrea? And you just, you know, okay, well, like, try something else, right? To try a little style shifting. You know, obviously you don't want to offend anyone with whatever you're doing, no matter where you are or what it is you're trying to do. So if you have common sense as a person, you're going to try to read the air, as we say in Japan, and you're going to try to figure that out and practice international good manners. And I don't ever think of myself as a woman per se. I don't go into situations thinking about myself as a woman. I don't do that. I think about myself as a person trying to get stuff done. And then my motivation is that. And I think if I'm respectful, as you said, Andrea, then that comes across in your meetings. If you're genuinely trying to do something good or effective or productive and you're not being offensive, I think you do get a lot of leeway in the international environment, whether you're a male or a female.
Sure. But if I do trip up, I laugh at myself and make a joke and say, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm sure I probably did something there that may have.
Absolutely.
And I think that humor, I think, has also been a way to bridge.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I actually experienced quite a different. It's interesting that I definitely agree with the authenticity piece, but I actually experienced the contrary first. That because I started my corporate job out of a graduate school in the States, and I started my first corporate job with PepsiCo, and there was expectation right there. It doesn't matter I'm from China. It doesn't matter I don't speak the language. So the expectation to perform the job the way it's supposed to be was set up there. So I learned in my early career that I had to adapt. I adapt to the style, the leadership styles, what works for the people I work with. So that is adaptability has been carried along with me through my corporate career. Then, interesting enough, I obviously had to overcome many obstacles. So the first barrier was the language. Then people think it was the cultural differences. Then I realized I was seen as a people of color. I did not realize it was people of color growing up in China. Everybody looked the same. And I did not realize I was a woman growing up either. So I was treated the same as a man growing up in terms of equality. And it was quite a roller coaster in a sense, and to learn to survive and to thrive later in the corporate world. So, and then another barrier I had to cross, Andrea pointed out, the technical world. I grew up, actually I got my graduate degree in science. I was in nutrition food science. I was a scientist in the first job, and then I had to navigate and cross and break the ceilings, get into managerial ladders. There were different ladders I did not know. And then you get into business side, and then deal with the corporate side. So every step the way, I want to say though, is not to brag about myself, but rather the learning I share with people is that understanding the other person's perspective, either as a cultural language or thought process, guess what? there was always a communication style differences. So later, when I actually help bridging the communication gaps, or when I managed the board for the joint ventures with China, I was often referring to that ambassador to close that gap. Obviously, both sides speak the same language, right? It's the English, right? People speak English really well in China, but yet the communication is not necessarily the same level. Why? Because there is a communication style differences. There is a thought process differences. So that's obviously, I see my value there. I help close that gaps. That's also, I'm passionate about that too. But what I'm really experiencing is that let's scrape through the surface. The surface is that there's a culture difference, there's a behavior differences there, but way beyond that. So there's historic way of thinking certain way. And I was asked to communicate the way I communicate. The Chinese way, maybe most the Asian way, is that I actually tell a story until the end. I tell you the conclusion, right? US, Andrea, tell me what do you want to say? Give me the key message in 10 seconds. Otherwise, I'm lost, right? So that takes years to change. I just give that one example. So interesting enough that when we're in this global world, we cannot just say, hey, we're US. This is how we do things. Guess what? The globe is pretty flat right now, right? So we can do e-communication like this, and we have all these executives on the phone. They have their own experiences too. So I want to say, let's leverage all these platforms, and let's acknowledge their differences. So not necessarily embrace that. So my biggest gift that I got from God is that I embrace the differences. I do not feel too sorry for myself that I meet all the labels like women and don't speak the language, or first generation, and women of color, whatever you name that, right? So I was often told like, oh, well, you don't look like Chinese now. Seriously, it's because I had to learn how to adapt, but never lose the authentic myself. Back to the point Debbie and Andrea you made, and Doc you're referring to, is that value, the leadership value, characteristics we bring to the table, it's unique, and I never lose that.
Yeah, that's
integrity too, right?
Interesting, your story about how you tell the story, and then at the end, my husband, I think this is male-female communication. I'll be telling my husband the story, wanting to explain why I'm doing something, to say, don't make me a clock, a watch, just tell me the time. I think that is kind of the cultural difference as well. And gender difference. Doug wants us to just tell him what time it is.
Yeah, it's interesting that all three of you touched on the concept of this international world of business versus maybe the local business. All of us, and thinking about what Debbie mentioned about OLs, and I happened to be in a joint venture that was very Japanese, and the OLs had that rock solid, you have to behave that certain way, and you can't do certain things. And the international world, all of us in that world, it's more comfortable. It's a better world. There's tolerance in that world for people being outside the local culture. And so I wonder, you're all working in that international world, so you probably can get away with more, I think is what you're saying, right? You can do stuff that they wouldn't expect a local person to do.
Yeah, not
is
for me.
that fair?
That's fair.
Not for me, right?
Yeah.
Yes, Susie, I think you might have a different, you said not for me right away. I definitely got passes in Japan that Japanese women don't get. Absolutely. And that's one reason I want to help Japanese women penetrate the workforce and get into higher positions. I have seen so many capable women be looked askance at. Nowadays, we're seeing quite a bit of difference compared to the 1985 horrible portrait that I painted with the office ladies. But I go into meetings now and I see women in higher positions, sometimes at the head of the table even, and that's good. That's a good thing. We're making progress. But it's much harder for Japanese women than it is for foreign women in Japan.
Yeah. Well, and it's becoming in Asia Pacific, it's becoming an imperative because they don't have enough people to fill the jobs.
Absolutely.
Which is, part of that Womenomics that came out. I mean, that was exactly what you need to, when you're leaving 51% of the population not contributing, it's pretty hard.
Yes.
To keep the economy growing at the pace that we need to accommodate the population that we have around the world.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know about how it is in China or India, but in Japan we have a situation where we have that low birth rate and the aging of Japan. So we don't have enough workers. We're feeling the pain even right now in terms of having a shortage of workers. So there's definitely an imperative.
China's in the same situation, which is one of the reasons they lifted the one-child policy. And now I believe the law is if you have one, if you're both only, you can now have 2 children.
I think in China, to that point, that the younger generations feel like they have more freedom to choose. They want to more focus on themselves. They choose their lifestyles. Unlike my time back there, is like I really had no choice. The only way I get to make a life is that I have to go to college and I have to find a job. There's also expectation to continue your career and your job after childbearing. Now the younger generation tends to more of like, hey, let me look at myself. So that has changed. But back to the point you guys talking about the leadership role, there's some positivities around China. Again, look at not just the data. I personally interacted with quite a few Chinese women leaders who are extraordinary during my works with China. So very sharp, very different styles, bring absolutely massive different leaderships to the table, and absolutely enrich the board, the financial situation. Andrea, you talk about the data. I saw that report as well. So, but yet there's still a gap. So even though China has been doing great in terms of board membership, board members, but it's still only 11% of the board members. It's women, and only 5% of CEOs are female. So again, expand the leadership roles to women is still a way to go. And not to mention that women leaders tend to have a limited occupation. That means in society expect women to have certain roles, not the other. For example, women tend to be more in the CF role if they're in the C-suites, or more around the HR. And that sounds similar to what the US is going on right now, right? So I echo what you said about US definitely has the opportunity for women in leadership too. And the board positions, and as well as the corporate roles that I have have observed.
Well, and the big obstacle to making it into those CEO roles is the profit and loss experience, and so that's why it's really important for women who have that P&L experience to be bringing other women behind them to get that P&L experience. That's that hurdle that they need to be able to get into those C-suites and board seats.
Absolutely. And again, I'm from the technical side. I definitely experienced that a few times because I want to get into the business side. The P&L responsibility has been the kind of roadblock for myself. Then I had to gain somewhere else through the international roles. So in the end, I definitely consider myself to be very lucky. So I do want to echo one of the points that you guys made around mentorship. That I know, Doug, you had asked that question through your emails as well. And I want to say one of the successes, key to successes for women in the leadership role is opportunities, is mentorship, is a sponsorship. So again, we're not necessarily, we're saying that it's going to be a given that we just have to do that, but that sponsorships and opportunities have been lacking. And when I count a few times that I've been successful and to achieve to the next level in the corporate world, every single time I appreciated some sponsors who are there, paved the way for me. Again, they really have to fight for me to get that role. They have to put their stake on the ground, really, their reputation on the ground. So I'm forever grateful, and now I'm trying to do the same. I really think that women like me who has experienced, who has been there, need to be the role model, but also reach out to those people, to the women's there to say it's possible.
Yay,
I look around, well, for a period of time, I look around, there was no single women of color and Chinese who are not a native Americans, right? So that really, that was one of my motivations, stay as long as possible in the corporate world. Now I'm in an entrepreneurs. I want to focus on holistic well-being. One of the key elements I try to help women to look at holistic well-being is that you have to look your leadership, your life, not just one sense as career. You have to look at your health. You also have to achieve the financial independency. So those three pillars are very important for us as women, as a leader, so that we can be a holistic self and come to the workforce, and we can bring more value to the workforce. So I said that to the Lee's Group's business school at the CU Boulder. I'm a mentor there for the past 15 years, and also DU for the business school. I just like open my arms, whoever want to reach out to me, and whoever need a role model and see what's possible, I want to be there for you. So that, Doug, I know I appreciate the opportunity here too. So if anything, if you forget anything that I've said, and please remember that I'm passionate about holistic well-being, especially helping women, young women, girls to be there, to be that role model, be that inspiration. So I'll be happy to offer anything I can, learning, experience, fails, drops, whatever, to young women out there.
Fantastic. Really appreciate that. And so if you're out there watching and you're interested in connecting up with any of the keynote speakers today, either go to the directory for Global Chamber, or if you have trouble, just send an email to info@globalchamber.org and we'll make the connection. We only have 2 or 3 minutes, so maybe a minute each. This time has gone by. There's so much to cover here, and you guys have so much to say. So maybe what we can do in wrapping up for each of you, we could just go around the table and get your crystal ball out, and let us know what you think. What the next 10 years will bring to this region. We've certainly seen a lot, and even in the last 6 months, it feels like we've gone through a decade of time, just month by month, with the COVID pandemic, with Me Too was not that long ago, the Me Too movement, which is still ongoing, and Black Lives Matter is something that has shocked certainly good parts of the world around racism. I'm wondering if there are some elements like that that pertain to this issue, where we'll see more dramatic change instead of what seems to be an evolving change. And so take your crystal ball and tell us what you see over the next 10 years. Who would like to take that question?
I'll start first real briefly. I think you're going to see more and more women stepping up into leadership roles because people like Susie and Debbie are, extending a hand to lift up that next generation. There's a concerted effort in technology. Right now, we already know that Chinese women are invested and engaged in those technology fields. And so helping them take that next leap in the Asia Pacific region, I think is going to be really important, and will kind of set a mark for women in technology in the rest of the world. That's where we need to be supporting women, is in technology.
Sounds good. Susie or Debbie?
I can go now. So I love the mentoring idea. I think that is so important, and I've always tried to contribute as much as I can. Maybe not as much as you. I think you had some really good ideas there, Susie. Thank you for that. The university level is really good. I also think getting us as speakers into even elementary school and junior high school environments, so that girls at a young age can see what can be done. Sometimes if you can see that something is possible, then you might be more interested in trying it. And I love the math and science focus there. I also wanted to mention that we are seeing Japanese women go into entrepreneuring positions and lots of interesting things there. I have a couple of people to introduce both of you to later in your work in Japan. But I also wanted to mention this initiative of Kathy Matsui and a number of other people called the Asian University for Women. They've been in existence for over 15 years, and they've had nearly 750 people, women from 15 different countries, graduate from there. And I think that's another area where it's like a branch off of, or an expansion of mentoring, if you will. And just standing up and being part of the change, right? Being part of the change and speaking out and making yourself available for mentoring. I think those are all really important things. And one other thing, I think US and European companies have a huge role to play in Asian markets by setting a good example. We have seen this happen in Japan. We have seen that Japanese women have tended to go towards foreign companies, if you will, because there tends to be more fully leveraged diversity and inclusion programs, flex time, telecommuting, all the things that might help a woman be a little bit more fully leveraged in her career. So I think companies also have a big role to play in setting a good example.
Totally agree.
Well said. I just want to add that in the next 10 years, I want to see more women support women, women empower women, not just the men empower, support women. I really think that women naturally can reach out and have tendency to reach out, and we just need to embrace that and embrace the women's network and have that mentorship, have the resource sharing, and be there for each other.
Andrea, that relates a little bit to the program that you guys have developed for Global Chamber, that the programs around leadership. Maybe could you just wrap things up and
Sure.
explain more about that?
So I'm really excited, and Doug and I have been working together to collaborate and build out an emerging leaders program that it takes the principles of the Athena leadership model and puts a cohort of women through that program together. We're actually just wrapping up one tomorrow night with a cohort of 22 women in the technology field, and it's been really fascinating to see them learn from each other. Look at how we were just bantering back and talking to each other, and we had that shared experience and are able to learn from each other's experience. And so we'd love to be able to do this with women around the world. I want them to have the same global connection and have the opportunity to network and engage with our sisters in Asia and Europe and all around the world. It was a really rich experience for me, for sure.
Wow.
Fantastic. Watch for that program. Starts August 13th. And boy, you guys have talked about a lot about progress. You've talked a lot about existing challenges. They never seem to go away. We're always kind of continuing to work on these things. And then, you know, the issues like Shirley Chisholm said, if they don't give you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair. So
Yep.
you all touched on issues around resilience and flexibility and being, you know, knowing where you are and what you can get away with maybe in this international manner space. And so you've clearly been successful in what each of you are doing. So congratulations on that. And so we're deeply honored that all of you spent the time today to share the information. Debbie, Susie, Andrea, and our Aparna, who we'll follow up with. We'll follow up with this event with some additional questions that we didn't get to in a blog post. And so this is a topic that we're going to be talking about for forever, for all of our lives, you know, and can continue to make progress with women, with people of color, with everybody in the workforce, and just being more successful in business, period, country to country. Thank you all.
Thanks Doug, for being an ally.
Oh,
we need allies too.
At the end of the day, women are going to help women, but it doesn't hurt to have, you know, other folks chime in as well. And so that's certainly what I hope everybody at Global Chamber does, no matter what. Let's just get away with the stuff we can get away with in the international space. Let's continue to make progress overall.
We appreciate you, Doug, and so great to hear from you, Debbie and Andrea. And please let me know what I can do to contribute.
So enjoyable. Thank you both.
Let's stay in touch, obviously. Take care, everybody. Thanks for everybody around the world who's watched today. Send in any additional questions you have. We have these things going on almost every day. We've had 2 of these today. We've got one coming up on Malaysia in a couple days, and we've got a League of Opportunities coming up on Friday, and we've got several more events next week, which I think includes virtual dining, which last month was Thailand, Thai food. So we did dinner in the US and we did breakfast in Bangkok. And this time is about Ethiopia, a dinner with Ethiopia. And we've got some Ethiopians who will be participating. So whatever your pleasure, whatever you're involved with, we'll keep finding ways to get you connected one way or another, whether we can meet in person or not, virtually. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.